Imagine walking into a shelter to find a lifeless puppy, a German Shepherd who seemed to have had no chance. What happened next would shock everyone involved. The truth behind this puppy's death would unravel a chain of events that no one saw coming. Stay with me. You won't believe what happens next. Mark was drawn to the German Shepherd puppies more than anything. Their striking eyes, alert faces, and boundless energy never failed to pull at his heart. On this particular visit, he was excited to meet the latest litter of puppies, each one more adorable than the last. But little did he know, one of them wouldn't get to see the world beyond those walls that Mark's footsteps echoed as he walked down the familiar hallway of the shelter, the sound a reminder of the countless hours he'd spent volunteering here. Today felt like any other visit, until he reached the kennel that held the new batch of German Shepherd puppies. As he peeked through the bars, his eyes immediately searched for the playful little ball of fur he had come to love. But something was wrong. One of the puppies was lying still, far from the usual playfulness of the others. At first, Mark thought it might just be sleeping, but as he got closer, he felt a chill run down his spine. The puppy's body was cold, its tiny chest not rising and falling with breath. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just asleep, it was lifeless. A wave of confusion washed over him. How could this happen? The shelter was supposed to care for these animals, not let something like this slip through the cracks. Mark's hand trembled slightly as he reached out to gently nudge the puppy, hoping for a sign of life. But there was nothing. His stomach twisted in knots as he called for one of the staff members, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The reality of the situation hit him fast. This wasn't just a sleeping puppy. It was a dead one. Mark stood frozen for a moment, his mind struggling to comprehend what he had just discovered. The puppy that had been so full of life just days ago now lay still, its tiny form lifeless. His chest tightened with a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. How had this happened? He looked around at the other staff members, hoping for an answer. But all he saw was the same shock reflected in their eyes. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the distant barking of other dogs. Mark could feel his heart ache for the puppy, for the lost potential of a life that had barely begun. He had seen animals come and go, but this felt different. He had known this little German Shepherd, watched it grow stronger, more curious with each passing day. Now, it was gone. The shelter workers moved toward him, their faces pale with worry. No one had an explanation. "This doesn't make sense," one of them murmured, their voice low with guilt. Mark wanted answers, but all he could do was stand there, feeling the weight of an unimaginable loss. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just a tragic accident. Something didn't add up. This puppy, like the others, had been well cared for, or so it seemed. Mark had visited the shelter often enough to know the routine, feeding schedules, exercise time, and regular vet checkups. But none of that explained what had happened here. He knew he couldn't just walk away from this without answers. Determined, he began asking the staff questions. When had the puppy arrived? Had there been any signs of illness? The responses were vague, scattered, and full of uncertainty. No one seemed to have a clear understanding of the puppy's recent health. Some staff members recalled the puppy being playful the day before, while others didn't remember much about it at all. Frustrated, Mark decided to dig deeper. He spoke with the veterinarian who had visited the shelter that week. The vet's face tightened when Mark mentioned the puppy's sudden death. There wasn't anything alarming in the puppy's health records, the vet said, but his tone lacked confidence. There may have been some internal issues that went unnoticed, but nothing I could pinpoint. Mark pressed further. He spent hours combing through the shelter's medical logs, looking for any signs of neglect. As he sifted through the records, he found something chilling. The puppy had been treated for dehydration just days before its death. The more Mark uncovered, the more questions he had. Was it really just bad luck, or was there something more sinister going on behind the scenes? The deeper Mark dug, the darker the truth seemed to get. The puppy's medical records were incomplete, with key details missing, dates, treatments, notes on its condition. There were no explanations for the dehydration, no mention of what had caused it. Mark's frustration grew as he realized that the care the animals were supposed to receive was slipping through the cracks. It wasn't just negligence, it felt like a cover-up. One afternoon, as he was sifting through a pile of old shelter reports, Mark stumbled across something unsettling. Several animals had been reported as lost or mysteriously sick, but there were no proper investigations into their deaths. This wasn't an isolated incident. There were signs of something much more serious. The more he read, the clearer it became. The shelter wasn't as it appeared. Mark's heart sank as he uncovered more disturbing details. He found records of other animals, dogs and cats alike, who had suffered similar fates. A puppy here, a kitten there, all of them having died under questionable circumstances. Some had been underweight, others had been inexplicably ill, but no one had connected the dots. It was as if the shelter had become a revolving door for animals in distress, with little to no attention given to their well-being once they arrived. That's when he got an anonymous message. A former shelter employee, who had left a few months prior, reached out to him with a warning. They were cutting corners, the message said. Animals were being neglected to save money. Some were even harmed to keep costs down. Mark's stomach twisted in disbelief. Was this the truth? Had the shelter, a place meant to care for these animals, been hiding a dark secret all along? The truth was becoming clearer, and it was more chilling than he could have ever imagined. Mark knew he couldn't let this go any longer. The truth was out there now, and it was bigger than just the death of one puppy. The entire shelter seemed to be built on a foundation of lies and neglect. He couldn't just sit back and let it happen again, not when there were so many innocent animals still inside those walls, depending on the people who were supposed to be protecting them. Determined, he took action. Mark reached out to local authorities, animal welfare organizations, and legal teams who could help him expose the shelter's wrongdoing. He shared everything, every detail, every record, every disturbing discovery he had made. It was time to hold the shelter accountable that he wasn't alone in this fight. The whistleblower, the former shelter employee, came forward, offering crucial evidence to back up Mark's claims. Together, they collected photos, videos, and statements from those who had witnessed the abuse. With the support of the animal rights community, Mark was ready to make his move, but it wasn't going to be easy. The shelter's management was powerful, and they would stop at nothing to cover up their actions. Mark knew that exposing the truth meant risking everything, but the animals were worth it. He couldn't let fear stand in the way of justice. It was time for the truth to come out, no matter the cost. Mark's heart pounded as he watched the events unfold, knowing that the truth was finally coming to light. The authorities took swift action, and soon, the shelter's doors were locked shut. No more animals would suffer behind those walls. The surviving animals were carefully transferred to reputable shelters, places where they could receive the care and attention they deserved. Mark was there, helping with the transition, making sure each one of them found their way to a better life. It was a bittersweet victory. While the shelter was closed, the damage had already been done. Mark didn't walk away from this with a sense of triumph. He walked away with a deeper understanding of the importance of accountability. He had fought for the voiceless, and while the battle was won, he knew there was still much work to be done to protect animals everywhere. As for the German Shepherd puppy, Mark knew one thing for certain. Its death hadn't been in vain. It had sparked a chain of events that would save countless others. The case was closed, but the journey Mark had been on would stay with him forever. The shelter was gone, but the lives it had destroyed couldn't be forgotten. The animals were safe now, but there were still so many others out there in need of protection. Mark knew that speaking out had made a difference, but it was just the beginning. As he stood outside the shelter one last time, he looked down at the German Shepherd puppy's collar, now resting in his hand. The puppy's life had been short, but its legacy was far-reaching. Mark was determined to continue the fight. That if you're inspired by this story, remember, even one voice can change the world. Like, share, and subscribe to stay informed on more incredible stories of justice and change. Thank you for watching.